What's up YouTube, and welcome to another tutorial using Infinite Painter, where today we're going to go ahead and create this really cool space scene. Now, as always, there's links to everything you're going to need in the description down below, the canvas size as well as the palette image, which again, as always, I'll show you how you can bring into Infinite Painter at the very start of the tutorial, and everything else is built in. Once you're done with today's design, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, Facebook, or anywhere else you decide to share your work. And of course, if you want to support the channel and the work that I do here, you can now become a member of the channel. You get a loyalty badge beside your name, early access, sneak peeks, and potentially more exclusives to come in the future. And again, if you want to support the channel and the work that I do here, you'll find a link to the join button down below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy today's tutorial, and let's get started. So you'll be able to see from today's canvas size, we're actually using one that actually matches to the size of the screen. So I'm going to use these dimensions here. And once you create your canvas, we'll zoom out a tiny bit. We'll go ahead and we'll import our palette. So we'll go up to the three dots. We will hit the option of import, and then you'll select where you've saved the image to. Once you've found it and you've tapped on it, it's going to ask you, do you want to import it as a layer or a reference? We want it as a reference, and it will pop itself up in there in the top left. So it's a screenshot of when I've previously done this on Procreate. Now we've got the palette in play. Let's go ahead and add in all the correct colors. So let's go in our layers here and go to the very bottom color here. And let's go to our color of our background, and we'll grab the pipette and we'll tap on this color here in the very bottom right of the palette. Now, what we also need to make sure is my equipment allows me to tap, and you can see the color changing. If you don't have that with your equipment, go up to the three dots and go to settings. And once you tap on settings, you're going to want to go down to the option of gestures and long press and make sure it's set to an eyedropper. So that way, when you tap on a color or you hold down, you'll get a little ring around your finger, which allows you to select the correct color. Now to start with, we're just going to go to our color though and drag it up into the top left to select white. We will then go to our brush. We're going to change it to fills, and we're going to use the solid fill brush. We're going to go to our create tools, shapes and circle. And what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a circle on our screen that's fairly large. Now, what I also want to do before we do that is if we go back up to our create tools and we go to perspective and we scroll across here and just add a grid to the screen. And now potentially you might not see this straight away. What you're going to need to go ahead and do is tap on the magnet here, to then get these two dots to appear. So I can drag this into the bottom right. What this is, I'm just trying to set out a 4x4 grid here on the screen, just roughly. Sometimes the lines go a little bit quirky, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you then where I lay out my design so you can see it against the grid and you can lay out accordingly. So if I then go ahead and we tap on the magnet to turn it off, and we've still got the circle tool in play. If we zoom right out, what we want to do is, well, first of all, we want to create a circle that's from the center out to as far wide as we can without destroying it off the side of the screen. And then we're going to want to zoom out and then make this really big. So we're going to make it really large, and we're going to try and position it so that, take a look at on my grid here, we're roughly around about 2/3 in on the top there, and then we have a little slither down here in here. So potentially I could even go larger than that, but we'll leave it like that for the moment. So take a look at the grid on my screen against your own and see if you can lay out accordingly. Now you can turn off that grid, we don't need that on now. What we do then want to do though is we want to make this the correct color. So I just set it to white for a moment so you could see it. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the color here in the bottom right of the palette again. So tap to select it, go to create options and go to the option of tools and fill. And we tap on there and then tap and drag to the right hand side just to fill that in, and hit the tick when you're done. Now, of course, we've completely lost it for a moment. The next step is to add in the lines that are going to sit on it. So we're going to go to our create options and we're going to go to perspective again, but we're going to go to the option here of isometric. Now you don't need to make any adjustment. You're just going to get this grid system. So essentially there's vertical lines or there's diagonal, both top left to bottom right and vice versa. So we're only interested in the lines that go up towards the top right here. So zoom in all the way out. You've added this to your screen. Make sure you do tap on the magnet so the magnet is turned on so it's slightly darker. What we then want to go ahead and do is go to our brush. We're going to go into the option of paint, and we're going to use the old Gouache brush here. Now the size wants to be fairly large to start with. We want to go up to something around about the 400 mark. You've already got your circle tool selected. You don't need that on anymore, so we can tap on this just to turn it off. Now we can do it on the same layer, or you can go ahead and do what I'm going to do, which is create a new layer and tap on it and clip it to it. So we're clipping it to it. We're going to go to our color though, and we're going to make sure we hit this color here in the top left of the palette. We're going to grab this nice purple tone. Now, the grid's in play and so is the magnet, meaning we only want to draw in this diagonal fashion. So start out here and start to run some streaks into your planet, and you'll start to reveal this edge over here. Now, they don't all need to be sort of the same pressure. They don't all need to be the same consistency, and they don't all have to fill out the whole entirety of the edge of the planet here. We've got more colors to add in. For now, though, give it a nice even-ish coat with some nice gaps in there for variation. We'll then create another new layer, tap on that and clipping mask it also just to make sure. We'll go to our colors and grab the middle color here in the first column and bring the brush size down to around about sort of the 200 mark on this occasion. And then we're going to streak in some blue in here in the gaps almost, but again in a similar fashion to try and sort of not fill out the entirety of it, but just add in some additional hues in here. Some areas can be a little bit more blue. That's perfectly fine. I say blue, it's more like a teal green, isn't it? And then if we go ahead and create another new layer, it will clip itself automatically. We'll grab the blue at the bottom of the first column, set the size to even smaller. Let's go down to around about 76 here. And we're going to run some blue lines through here as well. So we're going to run some blue in here. Again, creating some cool variations in the planet, introducing some new color tones as we go. Perfect. Now what we can do is we can actually get rid of the isometric grid. So we can tap on this icon here now. That gets rid of that. We're then going to go ahead and introduce some lighting. So we're going to create another new layer. It will clip itself. We will go to our colors and grab purple in the top left of the palette. We'll go to our brush. We're going to go into sprayers and use the soft airbrush. And we want the settings here to be as follows. So I've lowered the opacity and flow slightly. And I'm going to set the size to something nice and large. What's that set to? That's fairly large. I think we could go around about the 500 mark. Now it's important that we go back to the layer. We tap on it and we change its blend mode to the option of overlay. Then we're going to go ahead and go down this left edge over here. Going to go backwards and forwards a few times, and you'll start to see the colors all shift a little bit on this left hand side. So just a strong bit of color here on the left. It's very subtle, but it's a nice color change and shift of colors. We're going to create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors and grab the middle of that second column, that light blue on its own. And then again, we're going to very lightly now start to introduce some lighting, going over a few times. I'm going to build up a bit of a larger glow just to start with, primarily up in the top sort of left area here. You can see with the lighting starting to take effect. So once you've got a nice sort of bright area like so, we want to create another new layer. Tap on this and change it to the option of linear dodge. Once you've done that, probably bring your brush size down a little bit, maybe around to about sort of the 370 mark. And top left here wants to be the brightest, so you may need to do this in a couple of attempts, but essentially you want to brighten up the top left and bring that line just down and let it just fade out a little bit. So you've got the brightest spot up in the top left, and it kind of just fades down to the lighting getting really, really thin down here. So something like this will look fantastic. Now we can go ahead and create some clouds as well, so we can tap here. So we've got the orange, we've got the purple overlay layer. That's where I got that from. Overlay layer here, and we're just underneath it, and we'll create a new layer. So it slots perfectly in the middle there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the color here. So we'll grab the middle of the first column there, the second column. We'll go to our brush. We're going to go into sprays, and we're going to use the cloudy brush. Now, if we go to the settings here, I'm just going to bring the opacity down to start with to 50%. We're going to set the size to something nice and large, something that we can get a good large sort of brush head on there. So I'm thinking around about the 300 mark. And it's important that we go back to the layer and for a moment we tap on it and change it to color dodge, because you may want to change this afterwards. So we're going to go to color dodge to start with. We're going to go into our design. Let's move our layers out of the way for a minute. And I want you to start to patch in. So you may have to press a few times because the opacity is really low. Patch in some areas of cloud. Now, that's probably a little bit too low. So let's go a little bit higher now, 72% here, just so I can see the work that I'm creating. And again, it's really, really light. You have to go over yourself a few times just to build up some color, but don't go really heavy too quickly, okay? I want you just to start to patch in a few areas of where you want your cloud to sit. So keep gaps in between and in between your cloudy areas here. Now, once you've got kind of a few basic shapes in there, they're very, very basic. We're going to bring the brush size down to around about sort of 140 mark. We're going to bring that opacity right up though to 100% now. And where you've sort of laid out your fuzzy areas, I want you now to sort of on the top left edge of them, start to wiggle your pen a little bit more and try to create more of a fluffy cloud aesthetic to it. Now, obviously it's set to color dodge, so you are getting a few of these blues come through. If you need to, just tap on it and change it to normal if that makes your life a little bit easier. For example, I can see the colors here like so. So maybe I can go ahead and use it on just normal for a second and then go back. Whatever's easiest for you. This I'll keep as normal for a minute. So I'm just wiggling my pen along here, just trying to find those sort of areas that I created my clouds in. So we're really starting from nothing here and building it up. So again, you can see I'm kind of going over myself a few times here to really punch in some color. We're going to do the same up here as well. So trying to find, again, all those fluffy areas. Now, I've got quite a lot of gaps here. So I'm going to go ahead and start to introduce with this brush now, like a couple of extra areas of cloud in here. Maybe some over here on the right-hand side. Maybe a little more up here as well in the gap. Again, we want them all to be different. So try to maybe connect a few together, potentially. You want to have some nice variety in there. You want to avoid patterns. You want to avoid laying things out too sort of parallel to one another or leaving the gaps exactly the same. You want nice variation and randomness. Now I'm going to bring the brush size down again. I'm going to bring it down to about 64 now, and we're just going to really try to press quite firm. Again, if you don't have pressure sensitivity, you may just have to go over and over and over again just a few times to add in some additional color in here. Now, once you've got a few sort of clouds starting to build up, in a minute we'll switch our color out to something a little bit brighter, potentially even just solid white. But let's see how we go here. So let's just chuck this color in here, trying to again identify a few of the shapes. And we're not too focused right now because in a minute we're going to liquefy, so all of these are going to get swirled and pushed together, etc. So for a minute we're just trying to sort of lay out a basic kind of cloud aesthetic, and make sure you kind of push out a few here, kind of let them get really streaky, so push them along and create some streaks in there as well. So you know, you can literally just run a few lines through there. Now at the minute, again, that to me is looking a little bit too blue, so we're going to go to our colors. Now we could switch to this one here, the middle of the fourth column there. So we'll do that first before we switch to white. So maybe now we can introduce some slightly brighter tones. The color dodge is probably not going to work necessarily, but we'll see what it looks like towards the end of this stage. So now I'm just trying to chuck in some additional colors in here in the clouds, get rid of some of those blues, change them up and make them a little bit more white. Wiggling our pen along here, building up some clouds. And again, this is optional. Maybe you like the line work of your planet. Maybe you want to keep that as it was. That's perfectly fine as well. Now I'm going to go to the color. I am going to drag it up into the top left to straight white. So just straight white up in the top left. And then we're going to try and build in some more tones in here and a bit more sporadically. And also, because now I've got the white tone, I can start to wiggle my pen in the gaps and create these really small but very bright areas of cloud. I'm just going to keep going. And again, this probably one of the longest stages of this particular design. So do spend a little bit of time if you can, really wiggling your pen in here, building up some cool cloud work. It will pay off in a moment once we get through to like liquefy and twirling, etc. So I'm just going to wiggle my pen along the top here. And I've got some basic cloud formation. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. Now, the magic here is when we get into liquefy. So if we go up to our tools here and we go to the option of edit and we go to edit and liquefy, at this point we can now use a few of these options down here. Now the one I want to use first of all is going to be this one here. It's the first swirl option. Now if you set the brush size to something fairly large, I've got it set at the top there to about 700. I'm going to slowly move my pen in here and I want to really contort the clouds. Now just like on Earth, I want to try and create sort of wind essentially. So I want to kind of create like these streams of air almost, like pushing the clouds around a little bit, and not everywhere though. So in some places you may want to sort of set it a little bit like this, but then switch it to swirl on the right hand side there and bring the size down maybe and create some swirls that go in the opposite direction. So really sort of have some fun playing around with these, and I reckon you can really create some interesting patterns that you would not have been able to necessarily draw, but in terms of creating some interesting cloud aesthetic, you might be able to create something really interesting and really unique. Everybody's is going to look slightly different, but something along these lines will look pretty cool. Now, if you hit the tick when you're done, you can then go ahead and change the blend mode of the layer. So let me get my pen working. We'll tap on the layer blend mode here. We'll tap on normal. We'll change it to the option of color dodge. So that does boost the sort of tones in there quite a bit. It's up to you on what you prefer the look of. The other version is linear dodge, which is going to make it a little bit whiter and brighter. Now, I actually prefer the aesthetic of that, and I'm going to bring that down to 80%. But you may not, so it's totally up to you what you prefer the look of. Now, there is one more layer we need to create before we finish the planet. We'll go right up to the top and create a new layer. We're going to go to our brush and change it to sprayers and the soft brush again. We're going to go to our colors up here, and we're going to grab the color in the bottom right of the palette there. We're going to set the size to something nice and large, around about sort of 500 to 600 mark. And in the top right here, just go and blend out all of this. So really take it down quite a bit up here. I might even make my brush size a bit bigger, about 700 now, and really take away quite a bit of this and leave the brightest area to the left hand side. So you end up with this really dark effect here. Now, again, another option you can do is these lines here. If we bring out our palette layers here, we've got the line work underneath, and they all have these kind of streaks in them. If you want to, you can tap on one of them, the top one, and merge it down. So merge all three of those painted layers together. Then you can also go up to your adjustments or go to edit and filters. If we go to structure and blur, we can go ahead and blur this out just a little bit. Now that's way too much. I want to keep a lot of the kind of characteristics of those lines, but I don't want to have too many of the dark sort of really solid streaks in there. We want to make it look like the clouds take over a lot of the detail. So I think somewhere between 30 and 40% look really good. So I'm going to go right in the middle, almost 34%, and tap on the tick when I'm done. And now my planet's got a little bit of a softer look, but the clouds sit on top a bit more dominant. Love that. Now at this point, you can go ahead and pinch these together and put them all in a group, or you can tap on the top layer and keep merging it all down. I'm going to pinch and we're going to group them together, and I'm going to tap on the group, tap on its name, and just rename it, and we'll call it planet, just to keep things nice and organized. Now, once you've renamed your group, we can go ahead and then create some additional features. And the next one's going to be the background. So we'll create a new layer. It will clip itself. Don't worry, just tap on it and unclip it and drag it all the way to the very bottom. We're going to go into our colors and grab this color here. It's the top of the fourth column. Your brush still wants to be the soft airbrush under airbrushing with a good strong size. So I've got it set to around about 700 right now. I could probably go larger if I'm honest. Let's go up to around about 900 now. And in the top left, I'm going to just lightly, very, very lightly kind of blend down and create a very basic set of sort of color here. Now, you may or may not want to use, say, like the gradient tool potentially. It's totally up to you. I'm just trying to create a soft gradient that comes down the screen to around about this sort of point here. We're going to increase this though by creating another new layer. We're then going to go ahead and tap on this layer, tap on it and change its blend mode to linear dodge. And once you've done that, in the top left, you want to go ahead and increase the brightness up again, creating a bit of a larger glow, because there's a light source up here in the top left, but it's slightly off screen. And again, we're going to create one more layer again, tap on it and change its blend mode to the option of linear dodge again. And then just focus the lighting, so probably a little bit smaller of a brush size, maybe around about 600 now. And in the top left, create a light source and blend it out really, really lightly. Just blend it out like so. So you create a light source that's just up and out of our screen that we can't quite see. Now, if you struggle with any of that, just try to also factor in, you can go up to your adjustments and go to edit and go to edit and filters and then the blur again. And you could blur that out if you need to. The next step is to then introduce some stars. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll first of all pinch those three layers together, and you can rename that if you want to as well. You can rename the group and we'll just call it BG for background. We'll then go ahead and we'll create a new layer. It will sit above it. We're going to go ahead and grab the blue here in the middle of the second column there. And we're going to go to our brush. We're going to go into glow and we're going to grab the neon pen. Now the size, I've actually got it maxed out at the minute, and likewise the settings are here too. And what you want to do is, I'm just going to focus in the bottom half of the design for a minute. I'm going to tap a few times and we're creating stars. Now some of them are really, really small. You may have to tap a few times just to create some bright white dots in there. But to be honest with you, they look great if you can build up some variety. So a couple that are slightly smaller, a couple that are slightly larger. If you want to and you struggle with the neon pen, change it to the light pen. Try that instead. It comes out with a kind of similar aesthetic, but you kind of have to press a little bit firmer, and sometimes you have to tap a few times. But I'm going to switch back to the neon pen. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to urge you just to do the bottom half of the design, because what we'll do is we'll just duplicate this in a second and fill out the entirety of our screen really quick and easy by just duplicating the layer. So try and just focus in sort of a bottom third maybe of your design. Create lots of small stars, okay? Create as many small stars as you can, to be honest, because that gives your scene so much depth, so much distance as well. And round occasionally, just create some rounder, whiter dots here. That's perfectly fine as well. You can create some really fun sort of filled out scenes in your space area down here. So the blank empty space, but with some nice stars shining to fill out the rest of the scene. So once you've got a sort of good layout like this, I'm trying to just look for the height and make sure that I've kind of filled out to the same level. You can tap on this layer, duplicate it. You can then go ahead and we can go to edit. We could go to edit and basic transformation. We, for example, could scale this down in size. We could rotate it till it's now vertical and move it into a random space. So maybe I could like rotate it a bit diagonal, let's say into here. I can hit the tick when I'm done. I can tap on that layer, duplicate it, go back to my edit options and go to basic transformation and move that across. Maybe I'll rotate it the opposite way so I avoid any symmetry. That's what we want to avoid, symmetry being easy to spot. Hit the tick when you're done. And now we've got some awesome stars. Tap on these layers and merge them down. So tap and merge until you've got one layer of stars. Then tap on that and duplicate it. Go to your edit options and go to basic transform and move that up and move it off to the left. And again, we're trying to avoid symmetry or seeing repeating patterns. So maybe scale it down in size a tiny bit. See if you want to sort of add some additional stars in here just to really make sure that it's unique. It's totally kind of a mindset thing, to be honest. And then tap on that layer, duplicate that. Go to edit again, edit and basic transformation, scale that down in size yet again, and maybe move that up into here, rotate it a tiny bit. Let's try and see what we can come up with just in this top area and hit the tick when you're done. But don't be afraid to really fill out the entirety of your scene. I can tap on that and duplicate that too as well. Go to edit, basic transform and move that right down here into the bottom right of my design and sort of add in a few additional stars here and hit the tick when I'm done. They really add in a lot of detail, so spend as long or as little time as you want to in this area. But when you're done, just simply tap and merge all of the star layers into one. So now we've done that, let's go ahead and add in the rings. So let's create a new layer and drag it above the planet. We're going to go ahead though, before we do anything, and good practice with Infinite Painter, go up to the three dots and hit save. It's always critical to try and do that. We're then going to go ahead and go to our brushes. We're going to go into the option of paint. We're going to go ahead and we're going to find the option here for thick fiber. So we want this one here. Now I've got the size set to 201. We want our color to be this color here, the middle of that second column. We want to go up to our tools. We want to go to shapes and circle. We're going to drag out from the center of the screen and we are going to create a circle and a ring for our planet. So once you create something like this, tap on your circle tool when you're done. Now it's up to you. You can go ahead here and fluctuate the size if you want, make it a bit smaller or bigger, whatever you want. You can go up to the maximum size, to be honest, and that still looks really cool. And then when you're done, tap on the circle icon here. Now we need to distort this now. So I'm zooming right out because we're going to go to the option here of edit. Under edit, we're going to go ahead and go to transform and distort. We're going to use the top node here. So we're going to grab the top right node and move that up here. We're going to grab the bottom right node and drag that way up there and the bottom left node down here. So I'm just going to scale that wider at the top. So keep an eye out where these points are. That's top left, that's bottom left, that's top right, that's bottom right originally. And now we're just going to try and move these around, try and get the right angle and the perspective. I've gone a little bit wide there than I kind of need to. So let's bring those nodes in a tiny bit. It's okay if it runs off the screen a little bit as well. You can really bring that quite down if you wish and just drag it around as well. It will live update the distort for you. So you'll be able to see all of those changes in play. And we're looking to try and sort of maybe push that one up a tiny bit more, bring that one down. And I will eventually pause for you so you can see sort of where we end up. But ultimately, you can really lay out your sort of design as you wish with your sort of setup. That's going to be my final positioning. So I'm just going to hit the tick when I'm done, and I'm going to pinch to zoom in, and we end up with the rings there. Now, of course, this area here needs to disappear. Now, if you merged your planet all into one, that's perfectly fine. Open up the planet group and find the layer and just tap on this option here. If we tap on it and use the option here of, we're going to use select, we've selected that shape. If you then go back up to your rings at the top, go to your eraser, tap on your eraser and use something solid like sprayers and the hard brush. It doesn't matter what your brush size is, all you need is a brush size that's large enough so that you can go ahead and just quickly erase. And because you've selected the shape of the planet, you can't go anywhere outside of it. And then when you're done, just tap on this red dot at the top here. So we just erased right up to that gap now. Now on here, we're going to tap on our rings and we're going to alpha lock it. We can collapse the planet group down, we don't need that. Now on this layer, it is alpha locked now, which means, again, when I tapped on it, you can see the red lock, which means we can't paint outside of what's already on that layer. If we go to our palette and we grab the color here at the top of the fourth column, we're going to go to our brush. We'll tap on our brush and we'll just use airbrushing, so soft sprayers, so soft airbrush. Size can be set to something fairly large, around about sort of this 400 mark. We're going to darken up over here and blend out over to the other side. So we'll just darken up behind here. Just want to show where the planet's maybe darkening up the lighting on the rings. And then with a sort of opposite effect, we'll go ahead and we'll create a new layer. We'll tap on it and we will change the blend mode from normal to the option of linear dodge. If you tap on the layer again and clip it to the rings, and we go ahead, let's grab, for example, I think we grab the same color, I think we grab the same color as the rings, so the middle of the second column there. Set your soft airbrush again, but to a much lower size, so probably around about, let's go to about the 20 to 50 mark. We'll go up to 50 to start with. First thing you want to do is kind of run your pen really lightly along this edge here. And look how much sort of variation in color we can create. So we can go ahead and sort of run our pen in a certain position and create variation. Now I'm going to bring the brush size down. I'm going to bring it down to around about 40. And I'm going to try my best to kind of follow a line and follow it all the way round over to here and kind of just let that kind of fade out, creating again variation and variety in these kind of lines over here. If you can pick one that just runs way off onto the side, that's great. I love that. Maybe even then just set the brush size to like 60, for example, if not slightly bigger. Let's go up to about 70 and kind of just run a really light line here. Pressure needs to come off as you go. If you do not have pressure sensitivity, just simply grab your eraser and the soft airbrush like so and just fade that out, okay? That's all you need to do. So if you don't have pressure sensitivity, you can still create this kind of effect. So there's some nice variety in here. You can brighten that up in the distance, that looks fine. But just some interesting change up in the colors. Now when you're done, tap on this layer and merge it down onto the rings. And then we can go ahead and add in some sort of magic here, which is going to make this look like real broken down pieces of asteroid, real debris. Now if we go ahead and tap on this layer, we go ahead and we add a mask to it. So we'll add a mask. The mask by default is white, which means all of it's showing. If you tap on the mask here and you invert it, you're going to switch it to black so it all completely hides. Now making sure you're on the mask and not the layer, so you need to be here. Your color needs to be set to white in the top left. You're going to want to go to your brush, and in sprayers we're going to want to find the flex brush here. Now we're going to need two different sizes. We're going to need a size of 106 roughly, and they're going to be revealing the lines back here. So what you can do is, we're drawing on the mask as we speak, okay? If we try and find where our rings are that we created, I can see, there we go. They start to actually appear up here. So now I can draw them in, and look how we've now got this beautiful kind of scattering of small specks down here. Then what we can do is we can go to our brush. We can make it much larger, probably around about sort of this 200 to 300 mark. And then over here where we know our sort of rings are going to come in here, we can introduce some larger specks here because they're a little bit closer towards us, of course, and reveal the rings again. And maybe you just do certain areas that you want to. The brush does act a little bit funny. I do recommend though you have kind of patchiness to it. So if you want some more patchiness, just grab black, for example, as your color and then destroy some of the design. So literally just paint in with black and you'll be able to sort of fade out certain areas. Have some fun really sort of breaking it down, creating interesting gaps maybe here in the actual belts there, and just seeing what you can come up with. I like a little bit of sort of breakdown like this. I think it looks really cool. Now, when you're done, tap on the mask and go to the option of apply. So we're applying that change now permanently to the rings. What we can then go ahead and do is we can go to our edit options, edit, we'll go to the option of filters, we're going to go to structure and blur, and we're going to want to blur this out now to the point where we end up losing a lot of this. Now, one thing that's really important, if you tap back on this layer, you need to turn off the lock. And now this is going to really break down the specs here. So we want to sort of focus on this area here and kind of make it look like it is out of focus ever so slightly. So I think something around about sort of the 20% range there looks really good. You get a nice softer approach to it. So I'm going to go to the option of 20% and hit the tick when I'm done. Now it's at this point where we add in all the rocks. Now, again, good practice, hit 3 dots and hit save. We're going to want to go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to set our color first of all. We're going to set it to the option of white here in the top left. We're going to go to our brush. Now, a lot of you will be happy if I do this. We're going to go to fills. We're going to go to solid fill. We're going to tap on the settings for solid fill. We're just going to bring the smoothing right down. I think we can bring it down to maybe around about 10, 11. If yours is already there, you're good to go. And then on this layer, we're going to zoom in and we're going to create some of our nice asteroid rocks here. Now here, I roughly want you to kind of create your first main big rock here. This is your main focal point of a rock. So this is going to have some interesting aesthetic to it. Okay, so maybe do it a couple of times just to try and make sure you create something really kind of interesting, kind of broken down, real nice and edgy in its design. Maybe a little something like that. And once you've drawn one, you can then go ahead and start to draw in the rest of them in exactly a similar kind of fashion, but more sort of focused on making the rest of them a little bit smaller. So we're drawing them in white just to start with, so you can see all of the shapes. They will eventually end up dark, and you can have a few that sort of stray a little bit beyond here. That's fine. Vary up the sizes, vary up the shapes. Don't be afraid to create something really interesting, maybe a slightly elongated one. You know, they're just broken down areas of rock. I want to put a medium-sized kind of rock over here in this space, and then the rest should all roughly be around about smaller than that one, so in a kind of smaller category. So just creating some interesting shapes. You may want to go back into the smoothness and bring that all the way down if you want to really create some interesting rocky shapes in here. But try to sort of factor in, just like we did with the stars, we will eventually sort of duplicate the layer and make it all sort of smaller and fill the gaps. So you don't need to worry about the gaps too much. What I sort of urge you to do more so is just try to make sure you have a good solid sort of look and aesthetic to this that you really like the look of. And then when we duplicate it and make it all smaller, you'll just scale down all of that quality content that you've already drawn in, and then we can just fill out the space a bit more. So again, that one's my main one. I think, to be honest with you, I could just simply make that a little bit larger, to be honest, by just increasing the sort of overall body of it, the overall mass, just by going around it a few times just to create something a little bit larger. I want that one to be kind of my main focal point. I'm going to get rid of that top edge. That looks a little bit better. We'll get another one in here too. And every time you let go, you're then free to draw in another one. So you have real good freedom with this brush. That's looking really cool. We've got some interesting shapes. I think we could maybe create like another sort of medium one here to kind of go with this one, almost like a sister rock here, and then maybe another one in the gap. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and add some color to these. So let's create a new layer. Let's go ahead and pinch those two layers together so it puts it in a group. And you can open up the group. We'll tap on this new layer we created and clip it to the white shapes here. So we're on the clip layer. You want to go to your color and grab this gray here at the top of the 6th column. You want to go to your brush and change it to the option of charcoals. And we're going to grab the hard charcoal brush. The size wants to be a bit larger than what it is. So I reckon around about 40. And we're kind of drawing in the opposite at the minute, because if I get you to change these rocks to black, you might not be able to see them yet against the background. So they're temporarily white. Just remember that. What you're drawing in right now with the grey is technically your highlights. So for a minute, it's going to look like we're drawing in negative space. What I mean by that is if I introduce some areas of highlight, which is what this is, on the left-hand side, the top edge, at the minute, it looks like a shadow, but it will come around in a minute. So just add some lighting and effects to the top edges of some of these rocks. So top left edge, add in like little random wiggles and shapes here and there just to show how the lighting is landing on this randomly shaped object. You know, you can leave little gaps here and there, little something like this. I'm doing all the sort of small to medium ones first because I want to leave the larger one till the end. And then let's go ahead and go along here too. And little variations, little avenues. In fact, you could probably go a bit smaller. Try and bring it down to something around about maybe the 30 mark and go down the edges. Create little random avenues here and there for the lighting to just land on the rocks. We'll wiggle our pen along here and along the top surface. And then again, let's focus now on a larger one. So I'm going to create some interesting avenues where I think the lighting is. This area here, remember, is not what we're lighting at the minute. So everything that you leave white is technically like a shadowed spot. So this whole area is going to be shadowed, a little crevice there, and likewise up there too. You know, just a crevice or some sort of dark area where the lighting just doesn't quite make it. And again, do that on your larger one here. So I'm gonna really run some lighting up here. Spend some time just kind of detailing this in a tiny bit. Interesting avenues, squiggles and wiggles, to be honest with you, that's all it is, just squiggles and wiggles. Interesting sort of break-offs here, maybe the odd sort of random patch, especially the fact that this is a larger area. Maybe you can create like areas like this on the end. And that looks really cool. That's going to have some really nice texture to it. We'll have some texture on these ones in the distance too. Squiggles and wiggles, again, mainly on the left side of all of these little rocks, okay? So now what we need to do is we need to invert it from white to black. So what we can do is we can go ahead and go to our paint bucket tool. Now, mine's on my menu, but you go up to your create options and go to tools and fill. Grab this dot here to select the color. Grab your pipette. Grab the color in the bottom right of the palette. And then once you've done that, you can now tap, and you may need to tap and drag to the right just a few times just to increase the tolerance. But tap and drag to the right hand side every time you go to a little rock here. Now I'm going to just tap a few times because when it taps it actually fills in quite nicely. I'm going to tap and fill and just fill in all of my rocks here with the correct dark tone. And just zooming out, triple check you haven't missed any, and hit the tick when you're done. Now look at the awesome detail that we've created on these rocks. Now you can see your highlights. But talking about highlights, we've got more to add. So let's go up a layer. Let's create a new layer, tap on it and make sure it's clipped. When you also tap on it, make sure it changes to the option of linear dodge and bring the opacity down to around about sort of 70%. Then we're going to want to go up to our colors. We can grab the blue, for example, in the middle of the second column. Same brush as we were just working with, except now you can go ahead and run it on top of some of the gray areas. Some of them, that's really important. Some of the gray areas. You don't have to do everywhere, but mainly on the left-hand side, you want to kind of show where the lighting is brightest. So where is that lighting coming across from the very top of our design and landing on some of these rocks? The largest one's going to be the hardest, okay? But these smaller ones, you can just literally do a wiggle down that top edge and the top left side just to really show where the lighting's coming from. You can vary up the lighting. You don't have to do it the same on every single one. Some of them maybe are a little bit less, not quite as bright. Maybe some of them are blocking lighting. You can do the opposite. You can really pack in the lighting if you want. I can make a really bright surface on the top of this one. It's all about variety a lot of the time, and the more variety you can create, the more randomness you create, you arguably make it more realistic. Going down here, a little bit on there too, a little bit on this one. You can see it doesn't take too long to do. And then eventually you should end up with all these bright, beautiful rocks on here. Now again, take a look at your main focal point, just triple check you're happy with it and you like the lighting on it. That's going to be your main sort of rock that's going to draw the most attention. So make sure it's got the right amount of lighting on it. When you're done, you've now got all of your elements ready to go. So what we can do is you can go ahead and tap on this layer here and merge it down, and then tap on that layer and merge it down too. So all your rocks now should be on one layer. What you can then do is just tap on this layer and duplicate it. The bottom one out of the two, make sure you're on the bottom one. Go ahead and go to your edit options, go to basic transformation. We'll zoom out of our canvas a little bit. We'll move it up and we'll just scale it down in size and hit the tick. Now, I want to go to my eraser at this point and tap on my eraser and use something solid, like maybe the soft airbrush, for example. And if I set that to a small size, so what I want to do is I just want to go ahead and get rid of this main focal point. This is going to be really, really, really obvious. So my brush needs to change, for example, to the hard brush and bring the size down too. It's going to be really, really obvious that that one was duplicated from the largest one. All of these other small rocks are going to be really sort of easy to just fill out the rest of the space. Likewise, your medium rock that you created over here. Now you've got this. This is all you need now to start scattering in some additional rocks. So turn it off tap on it and duplicate it. Turn on, say, the top one and edit that one. So you've always got this backup underneath in case you need more rocks. And every single time, just go up to your edit options and go to basic transformation, scale it down in size and chuck it in the gap. Hit the tick when you're done. Go back to the one that's turned off. Tap on it, duplicate it, turn it back on. Go to your edit, and basic transform. You can rotate it a tiny bit, bearing in mind the lighting is always pointing up, so you can't rotate it too much. You have to abide by the lighting. Make them really, really small if you want. A little something like this. Hit the tick when you're done. If you like the angle of that one and you just want to tap on it and duplicate that one, do that. Go to edit, basic transform, and let's move that around a tiny bit. So let's rotate that maybe a tiny bit to the opposite direction and chuck that in some of the gaps. Hit the tick when you're done. And you really kind of want to fill this out with medium to like large sizes. So I'm going to continuously go back to the original one that we created, turn it on, edit, go to basic transform again. So basic transform. We'll scale this down in size. We'll move it over to the right hand side on this occasion. Try and fill out that area. Hit the tick. Again, go back, duplicate it. So at this point, it's very much like the stars. Sometimes with digital art, you can definitely get away with just creating a certain element and then using it multiple times. You know, it's very different to traditional art, of course, but we do have that luxury. Hit the tick when you're done, and we're slowly building up this amazing level of detail. Now, don't go too far with it. I would urge you not to do too much. I'm going to do one more, which is going to get really small. Okay, I'm going to make this one really small and chuck it all the way back here. So as if the detail now is falling off and is gone now. We can't really see any more elements of detail. Now, this is optional, but what you can then do is introduce some dark spots. Now, before we do that, excluding our main rocks at the top, I'm just going to keep tapping and merging down all those extra small versions into one layer. So we can save on our layers a little bit. Once you've done that, by the way, just go up to 3 dots and hit save as always. Now, go ahead and create a new layer and drag those additional rocks above. You should then have an empty layer underneath. Go to this color here in the bottom right of the palette. Go to your brush again and go back to fills and the solid fill. And then in the gaps down here, it looks like I've turned off the rocks, which I have. I'm going to bring it back in. In the gaps now, you can go ahead and draw in some just straight black rocks, okay? Just rocks that are just not got any lighting, really doesn't matter. But these rocks here are just going to be really, really small. And you can do a few that run off into the distance down here. Just really, 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 really small, okay? Just a few. And likewise over here as well. Just introduce some dark rocks in the gaps. They just don't get any lighting. And that's all they are. Just really small. And they should be, again, more on the smaller side, to be honest. Not too large. Because if they're too large, they should get some sort of lighting. But we're just going to fill in the rest of the scene with some smaller additional tiny little bits of debris and break down here. Now that's looking awesome. I'm going to go ahead though and pinch with 2 fingers. We're going to go full screen with 4 and we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial using Infinite Painter. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram or Facebook, anywhere where you decide to share, you can go and tag me. As always, if you want to support the channel and the work that I do here, you can now become a member of the channel. You get early access to these tutorials, as well as sneak peeks and potentially some exclusives to come in the future. There'll be a link to the join button in the description down below, again, if you want to support the work that I do here. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll love this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.